cars passed by, but very few of them stopped. But the street vendors sitting by the roadside were not upset by this. They were happy, even if they could sell at least something during the day. Most of them were old ladies, but there was a girl among them. The girl was only about 15 years old, but she was already trying to earn some money. Some might have thought she was replacing her grandmother or her mother, but Christine worked there daily, every day near lunchtime. She walked here with a wheelie bag full of jars, silently laid out the goods, and waited for customers. Other local street vendors did not like her. Not only was the girl taciturn, but she was also their main competitor. People bought her products more often. Christine didn't like her job. It was very difficult for her to get that jam. Her grandmother made her work in the garden all summer, watering the trees and bushes, tending the garden and harvesting. It was good that Grandma didn't make Christine make that jam, but did it herself, and then she had to bring it to the road and sit there until late at night. While her classmates had fun after school, she had to work. One day, the trade began with an unpleasant moment. One woman twisted a jar of jam in her hands for a long time, and when she found out the price, she put it down unhappily. Then she walked along the road, looked at the goods of the other vendors, and when she was sure all of them were overpriced, she pestered the girl. "I heard that someone is purposefully poisoning people with goods like this," she said. "Nobody checks your jam, and can you put anything you want in the jar?" She said many other mean things to the teenager. That woman sensed Christine's weakness and decided to mock her, because all the other vendors resisted and started cursing at her. But the girl froze, frightened, and said nothing. In the end, the woman said she was going to call the police, which scared the teenager even more. When the scandalous lady's car drove away, the girl asked the old ladies if she could really do that. They only laughed. "She just wants to make a fuss, and she's certainly not going to call the police," said one of them. Christine calmed down a little, but not for long. After a while, an expensive black car approached them. A man in a suit got out and looked around as if he was looking for someone. The girl tensed up when he walked towards her. "Have you been selling here for a long time?" he asked. "Not really, and not every day, only during the school breaks," Christine replied confusedly. "My friend told me that she purchased jam here, I believe, from you," said the man. "Do you make it yourself, or do your parents help you?" he asked. Christine glanced frightened at the other vendors, but they only watched silently. "My grandmother makes this jam," the girl replied, and immediately began to make excuses. "She makes it all neatly. The jam is made from selected berries." "Can I talk to your grandmother?" the man asked. "Why?" The girl was even more frightened. She thought that he came here because of the lady who had threatened her today. Christine was very nervous. The other vendors started packing up hurriedly, thinking it was an inspection, and while the man was talking to the girl, they packed up their goods and left. Christine was alone on the highway with a man she did not know. She was scared. She realized that she was in trouble. Even if it wasn't an inspection, it might be a maniac. Now he was going to push her into a car, and that was it. No one would ever know where they had taken her, and there's nowhere to run because he'll catch her. And how can she leave the jars here? Her grandmother wouldn't listen to her, but only scold her. Christine hoped the man would get in his car and drive away, but he insisted that the girl should introduce him to her grandmother. Maybe he thought she was a teenager and couldn't be responsible before the law, so he wanted to arrest her grandmother. She told him her grandmother was sick and wouldn't be very happy to see strangers, but the man was adamant. Finally, he said he was willing to buy everything the girl had, but for that, she had to introduce him to her grandmother. He even gave her money. She had no choice, so she agreed. She got in the car, mentally figuring out how she was going to get out of it. If this man was a policeman, then there would be less trouble. Then her grandmother would scold her, but she would stay alive. But if it's a maniac, there's not much choice. She had to escape somehow. The girl grabbed the door handle and decided that she should wait for the right moment to escape from the car. But the man immediately locked the doors and asked her for her address. She pointed the way, and they drove straight to her grandmother's house. At least Christine realized it wasn't a maniac. Soon the car arrived at their house. As soon as Christine opened the door, her grandmother asked from inside the house. "Christine, is that you?" she asked. Why are you home so early? The weather is nice. Don't tell me you sold everything. You just want to avoid work." The granddaughter silently entered the house, followed by the man. Christine trembled with horror. She prepared herself for her grandmother to scold her even more, but her grandmother stared at the visitor in silence. The girl mentally tried to think of what she would say to her grandmother to justify herself, but then she noticed that grandmother was suspiciously quiet. Christine looked apprehensively at the man, who was standing there staring intently at her grandmother. "Well, hello, son," the elderly woman finally spoke up. "So you found me." The granny's hoarse voice trembled. She looked at the man and smiled crookedly. Christine stepped away from the stranger and looked at him thoughtfully. It sounded like some kind of mistake. Did Grandma have a son? She had never talked about it. The elderly woman no longer thought she would ever meet her son again. She didn't want that meeting, and she didn't expect anything good from it. This story began many years ago. She had 2 children, a son and a younger daughter. Her husband educated the son, and he tried to raise him to be a real man, and she gave birth to a daughter for her own sake. She loved her more than anyone else, nurtured and spoiled her, as they could afford it. Her husband made good money, but when Lionel was 16, his father was seriously sick. Realizing he would die soon, he told his wife to divide the money between the 2 children. The woman promised that when the children came of age, she would give each of them half the money. But she was not ready to support the whole family alone, so she began to spend that money slowly. Her daughter was only 13 years old and needed to be supported, but her son was grown up. He could earn his own money. She sent him to college. The boy was clever. He knew how hard it was for his mother, so he did not ask her for anything. He started to work early on. He repaired cars and motorcycles. That was what his father taught him. His mother realized that Lionel was worth something and started demanding money from him. She said it was very difficult for her to support her daughter, as she was still a minor, so he started supporting his mother and sister. When Lionel turned 18, his mother gave him nothing. She only had some money left at that time, but she decided her daughter needed that money much more than Lionel because he could take care of himself. Lionel worked hard and never asked for help. His father had raised a real man and taught him to support his family. Lionel saw that his mother devoted herself entirely to his sister and that she often simply forgot about him, but he was used to it. He tried to achieve everything by himself. He worked hard and was good at everything he did. Lionel never complained. Then he married a nice girl, and they bought an apartment, and soon his wife got pregnant, and at the same time, his mother told him the news about his sister. She was pregnant too, but the baby's father had left her, so they would raise the baby themselves. The sister later confessed that she did not even know who the father of her child was. But that helped bring them closer together. The sister and her brother's wife started communicating closely, and when his mother told him that they had to support his sister financially, he harshly told her that he did not owe her anything. He told her that his sister was an adult. Her mother had spoiled her, and she did not want to work. She only went to the clubs and partied. His mother shut up and never said anything more about it. But when it was time to give birth, she asked Lionel to look after his sister at the maternity hospital and help her. They happened to give birth on the same day. Lionel was away on a business trip for 2 days, and that's when it happened. His wife underwent a C-section, and his sister gave birth naturally. When he arrived, there was sad news for him. He and his wife had a disabled baby girl, while his sister had a healthy girl. But they did not abandon their daughter. They did everything to raise the child. The mother did not help them at all. She said that it was not necessary to take the child from the maternity hospital. She had her own problems now. She was raising her second granddaughter. She was raising her alone since her daughter was still having fun, and she didn't have time for a child. Lionel was making good money by then, and they had enough money to pay for his daughter's therapy. His wife was also working. They were saving up for surgery at a good clinic. Fortunately, his mother-in-law helped. She babysat their daughter. Then misfortune happened. Lionel had a car accident and ended up in the hospital. It happened when his wife, mother-in-law, and daughter went to a health resort for treatment. So he called his mother and asked her to urgently buy expensive medicine for him. He told her where they had money in their apartment and asked her to take it to buy medicine. Fortunately, she had spare keys to her son's apartment. The mother was willing to help her son, but when she saw a lot of money in the stash, she couldn't help herself and took all the money. She still brought the medicine to her son to make sure he would not suspect anything right away, and then she quickly sold her apartment while her son was in the hospital, took her daughter and granddaughter, and left for another city. But they quickly ran out of money. The daughter remained good for nothing. She did not take care of her daughter, Christine, at all, and Christine's grandmother had to raise the girl. Soon the daughter died of alcohol, and the grandmother was no longer happy to have a granddaughter. She treated her like a stranger, especially knowing that she was Lionel's child, not her daughter's. Christine grew up and didn't know what love and care were. Her mother knew that her son was alive, but she was ashamed to remind him of herself, so she raised her granddaughter all alone. Lionel and his wife were able to solve the problem. He recovered quickly. They took a loan to pay for their daughter's surgery, earned enough money, and returned the money to the bank. They nursed their disabled daughter, and in spite of everything, they loved her. She grew up with minor disabilities, but not too noticeable. The girl turned out to be very clever. He preferred not to mention his sister and knew nothing about her and his mother. He did not have much time. He had his own life, and he and his wife tried not to think about the bad things that had happened once. But then, some unexpected news came up. One day they got a phone call. The old lady on the other end of the line said she had something to confess. She told them that she worked as a midwife. The day Lionel's wife and sister went into labor, she was in the hospital on shift. His mother was also in the maternity hospital that day. When the mother found out that her daughter gave birth to a baby with a disability, she asked the midwife to switch the babies, and she paid her generously. And she agreed. No one noticed the switch. But all these years she felt guilty, and now she is dying. Before she dies, she wants to confess everything and relieve her suffering. It wasn't difficult to find Lionel's phone number. She knew the man and had been following his story her whole life. He had his own company, so it wasn't difficult to get his phone number. The couple was shocked by the mother's behavior. They tried to find her but failed. There was no trace of her. After all, too much time had passed. There was no hope of finding his mother and their daughter. The father got on the trail of his daughter by accident. One day, his friend's wife bought some homemade jam by the roadside. Lionel visited his friend and they had tea with that very jam. Lionel immediately recognized the taste. His mother made the best jam. Everyone who tasted it praised it, but no one could make the same. The man had hope now. He found out from a friend that a girl by the road was selling this jam, and he went there right away. That's how he got on the trail of his mother. It turned out that Christine had no idea that her grandmother had 2 children, and needless to say, she had no clue why her grandmother treated her like a stranger. It was not because she had a hard time raising her granddaughter alone. Grandmother had no pity for the girl, forced her to work hard and sent her alone to the highway to sell jam, even though it was dangerous. Lionel was shocked at how obsessed his mother was with her daughter. Switching the babies in the maternity ward was an insane thing to do. She just wanted her beloved daughter to not be upset. But, as it later turned out, Lionel's sister did not care about her child. It was a very strange kind of motherly love. And what is love? Lionel turned out to be a good man, after all. He was worthy of deep respect. He helped his mother and paid for her treatment, but he never wanted to see her again. He took Christine to his house, and they won custody of their biological daughter. Now they were raising 2 daughters, and they loved both of them. Thankfully, Christine finally discovered what it was like to have a real family, to be loved and cherished, even if it was so late. And her grandmother had only one thing to be thankful for. If she hadn't sent her granddaughter off to sell jam, Lionel would never have found his daughter. Also, her other granddaughter ended up in a good family, because otherwise she would have just been abandoned